Hi.
Hey,
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah. Had a busy day at college?
Yes, and also Asiatic work.
You'd gone to the Asiatic?
No, I didn't go, but I was sitting here and doing it. Lots of reports to be sent to the central government. So I'm sitting with Mani and doing it.
Okay, I noticed that a lot of people have already joined in, huh?
No, about 4, 5. I didn't know which
Who
one.
else?
I will just tell you.
Dr. Bahulkar, you must let in,
Yeah. Uh,
not the others.
okay. Mr. Gopal Krishnan has joined. It's
No, but don't let him in.
no, he's already there. Okay, Snehal Kondalkar is there, and after that I stopped.
No, Dr. Shrikant Bahulkar.
Yeah, he's there already.
Yeah. So let him in.
He's there. He's there.
He's in.
And two more people are there.
Okay. Hello there. Namaskar. नमस्कार. आपली आता भेट स्क्रीनवरच होतीये. Is he on mute, Usha? I can't hear
He's
you,
not on
Dr.
mute. He's
Paulkar.
not on mute. Not on mute. I think he needs.
Maybe he has to increase the volume.
Yeah.
Topic drawn from fields that Durga Bhagavat had engaged with, namely anthropology, folk art, religious traditions, culture, and literature. The first lecture was held in 2012 by the Society. I would now like to introduce you to the speaker for today, Professor Dr. S.S. Bahulkar. He has been teaching undergraduate and postgraduate courses in Sanskrit for more than 40 years, during which time he has been engaged in a variety of research projects. Both his research and teaching relate to Vedic studies, Buddhist studies, Ayurveda, and classical Sanskrit literature. For his PhD, he worked on, the title is The Healing Practices in the Atharva Veda, and published his thesis under the title Medical Ritual in the Atharva Veda Tradition. He continued his research in that field and worked on the exegetical literature of the Atharva Veda. After that, having done his MA and PhD in Sanskrit from the University of Pune from 1970 to 77, he taught Sanskrit and conducted his postgraduate research at Nagoya University, Japan, where he began to study Tibetan and Japanese languages and Buddhist tantric works in Sanskrit and Tibetan. Later, he worked in the Deccan College, Pune, Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapit, Pune, and Central University of Tibetan Studies in Sarnath. He headed the Department of Sanskrit at the Tilak Maharashtra University from 1981 to 2009 and taught Vedic and classical Sanskrit texts. He has written and edited 12 books and published 60 research and popular articles. At present, he is working on a number of research projects pertaining to Vedic, classical Sanskrit, and Buddhist Sanskrit texts. For his outstanding contribution to Vedic and Sanskrit studies, he has been honored with several prestigious awards. It's difficult to name all of them, but I would like to mention the Mahamahopadhyaya P.V. Kane Gold Medal of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai. Currently, he is adjunct professor at the Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies at Savitribai Phule Pune University and the KJ Somaya Center for Buddhist Studies in Mumbai. He is also the director of the Academic Development Program and editor of the Annals of the Bhandarkar Oriental Institute in Pune. Dr. Zamkhedkar, we are honored that he will preside over this lecture. He is an eminent archaeologist of international renown and is currently the chairman of the Indian Council of Historical Research and chancellor of Deccan College, Pune, deemed university. For us, he is really speaking, well, especially he was a vice president of the Asiatic Society And now, at our request, he continues to be a member of our managing committee. Professor Dhamkhedkar completed his doctorate in ancient Indian culture from Deccan College, Pune, after a master's degree in Sanskrit, both from the University of Pune. He has received numerous international and national honors, fellowships, and awards, including the Asiatic Society's Silver Medal. He has published several monographs, contributions to excavation reports, and a large number of research articles, including some in Marathi, in international and Indian journals. He was instrumental in designing various academic courses at the University of Mumbai, Pune, Nagpur, and at Deccan College in Pune. I now hand over the proceedings to you, Dr. Dhamkhedkar. We look forward to a scintillating educative session. Thank you.
May I now request Professor, today's speaker, Professor Shrikant Baulkar, to deliver his lecture, the endowment, the prestigious Durga Bhagavat Endowment Lecture. Professor Baulkar.
Honorable Professor Dhamkhedkar, Chairman of the present lecture, Professor Meenal Kshirsagar, Vice President of the Asiatic Society and Chairperson, Endowment Lectures Committee of that society, Professor Usha Vijay Lakshmi, Officiating Honorary Secretary, Professor Meena Vaishampayan of Asiatic Society, other office bearers, Professor Kutumba Shastri ji. I am audible, sir?
Yes,
am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Okay,
Very
okay.
much so.
Professor Kutumba Shastri ji, Professor Radha Vallabh Tripathi ji, and friends. This event, I sincerely feel, is one of the precious moments in my ordinary life. I have been asked to deliver a lecture in the loving memory of Durga Bhagavat, who, as we all know, was a great scholar, a versatile scholar who wrote extensively on a variety of subjects that crossed the boundaries of various disciplines. I deem this a great honor done to me, and at the same time, get a sense of diffidence, as I'm not sure if I shall be able to do justice to this honor conferred upon me. I am reminded of a verse of Kalidasa, who, not because of his diffidence, but out of modesty, expresses his feelings at the beginning of one of his plays. He says, Aparitoshad vidusham nasadhu manye prayoga vidnyanam balavadapi shikshitanam atmanya pratyayancheta. He says, I do not consider my knowledge of the performance adequate until I see the satisfaction of the learned ones. Although the mind of the trained ones is quite strong, it is not confident about themselves. In my case, rather, I must say my diffidence surpasses my modesty. I shall, however, try to do my best, leaving the judgment to you all who have kindly made it a point to spare time for my lecture. The topic I have chosen today is the symbiotic relationship between the river and the cow in a legend of Bahula. I had already spoken briefly on this topic some time ago as a chief guest in a seminar held in the memory of Dr. Rachim Dhere and Professor Zamkherkar, who is presiding over this lecture, had also presided over that seminar. So he is therefore already familiar with the topic. At that time, I had made a very brief speech as a chief guest because I did not want to give a long lecture and snatch the precious time reserved for others. But an enlarged version of that speech has appeared in Marathi in the proceedings of that seminar. This evening, I now take the opportunity to present a somewhat different version of that speech that has been published in the proceedings. I'm happy to inform you that this lecture too is going to be published by the Asiatic Society in the foreseeable future. I would open the topic by quoting Durga Bhagwat from her book, An Outline of Indian Folklore. It's an English version of her well-known book in Marathi, Loka Sahityachi Rupreka. Durga Bhagwat says at the outset, I quote, Indian culture as represented in folklore has been one and the same quality, texture, and strength since Vedic times. Whether you study a proverb or a myth or a riddle or a song, you almost certainly find its type either in Vedic, Buddhist Jain literature, or in the epics and the Puranas, unquote. As far as the rivers are concerned, there are a number of legends that have come down to us as folk tales, mainly through the oral traditions. And at that time, at times, they are recorded in the text representing one of the forms of the particular legend. A question may be asked in this connection as to whether the written tradition comes first or the oral one. But I must tell you, there cannot be one and the same answer with regard to every such case. It is necessary, therefore, to examine the individual case and find a solution. The traditions, both the oral and the written traditions, undergo certain changes, and some portion is added, some is omitted, and the tradition continue with certain modifications. The legends find their place in the textual tradition and get modified by the authors for a number of reasons. It depends upon the ways of thinking of those authors that do not necessarily follow the folk traditions. The oral and the textual traditions influence each other and continue in their own ways. The same legends are recorded in a variety of texts. We thus find the three aspects of the legends, namely those connected with their orality, their textuality, and their intertextuality. It is interesting and equally important to find the origin of a particular legend. However, it is much more important to find how both the traditions have undergone certain changes
Sir,
and the reasons for such changes.
sorry to interrupt. Can you adjust your screen? People want to see your full face. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We know of a number of legends describing the origin of the rivers. One of the famous legends is that connected with Ganga. That is the legend of Gangavatarana, in which King Bhagiratha brings the Ganga down from the heaven to the earth. There is another legend connected with the river Godavari as well. One can see how a legend is responsible for the nomenclature of a particular place, and we find that the name of a river is given to that place. The legend that I am going to discuss today is perhaps a unique one, connected with a small river named Bahula, in Marathi Bahula. There are more than one rivers of that name. There are at least two in Maharashtra. One of them is in Jalgaon district of Maharashtra, where there is a dam called after the name of the river. It is Bahula Dam. The other is in my native place, Bahul, which is a small village situated on the banks of the Bhima River. It is about 40 kilometers from Pune, near Chakan Pabal Road. There is a small stream in my village called in Marathi Bahulaicha Odha. That is the small stream of Bahulai, goddess Bahulai. There we find a Gomukha on a hill from which the stream flows. The name Bahul given to my native place is possibly after the name of the river, or maybe after the name of the goddess Bahulai, who is a personification or a deification of that river. We in our childhood heard a story of Sri Krishna's cow Bahula. I'll just give a story briefly. Once Lord Sri Krishna wanted to test the honesty of his cow Bahula. One day, she had gone out for grazing. On her way back, a hungry tiger obstructed her way and wanted to kill her. Bahula requested the tiger to wait for a while so that she could go home and feed her calf. Bahula promised to return as soon as the calf was fed. The tiger trusted Bahula's words and waited for her to return. Bahula hurriedly started for home. She fed her calf, baby calf, and started her way back to the forest. On her way, she became very thirsty. She did not find water. Then she started digging the ground and finally found some water to drink. She quenched her thirst and returned to the forest as promised. The tiger was delighted to see her as she had kept her promise. He revealed his true form. It was Lord Sri Krishna. He was much pleased with her honesty. The place where Bahula found water came to be called Bahulaicha Odha, and the name of the village came to be known as Bahul. Now, when we try to find the source of this story, which is current in local tradition, which has come down to us through that tradition, we come across a similar story in the Bhima Mahatmya. In its Adhyay 24, there are verses 1 to 34 where this story is narrated. The colophon of the manuscript of this work, there are some 4 manuscripts in Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute and maybe elsewhere. So the colophon of this manuscript mentions that the said Bhima Mahatmya belongs to the Uttarakhanda of the Padma Purana. The title of the Adhyaya is Bahula Tirtha Mahima. It means the glory of the sacred place Bahula. However, the edition of the Padma Purana does not include this chapter. At least I did not find it in the edition which I consulted, which is published by Anandashrama Pune. There is nothing surprising in it. There are a number of works that claim to belong to some Purana. For example, we know full well the colophon of the Satyanarayana Katha says that it belongs to the Reva Khanda of the Skanda Purana. However, we do not find that portion, that Katha, in any of the versions or the editions of that work. One of my teachers, Professor Divekar, has his own interpretation, and he would say he has written an article on that, very interesting article. He says that this may not be Skanda Purana, but it must be Skanda Purana. I do not agree with that. So as regards the legend of Bahula, the oral tradition merely narrates the story. However, in the Bhima Mahatmya, the story is narrated by Brahma to Narada. I shall present a gist of that story as narrated in that work. I am giving the versions of that story found elsewhere. The story runs this way. There was a country named Machara. I do not know what kind of country is this. Machara. It consisted of a number of Janapadas and was prosperous with wealth. There lived a rich Brahmin, a farmer by profession. He had a good cow named Bahula. Once she was grazing along with other cows, and while grazing went far away from her friends and ran into a tiger. The tiger tried to stop her and asked her not to run. At this, she began to cry. The tiger asked, "Why are you crying?" She replied, "My calf is too young to eat grass." The cow wanted to go home, feed her calf, and therefore she promised the king, so the tiger, to return to him. But the tiger would not believe her. He said, "Once you go home, you may not want to leave that lovely place and come back to me." Then the cow took an oath and promised him that she would go home, feed her calf, and return to him for certain, because she would commit a great sin if she does not keep her promise. The tiger somehow trusted her and allowed her to go home. She went home, fed her calf, and instructed the calf to take care of itself. She also requested other cows to protect the calf. Then she returned to the tiger and was prepared to die. But the tiger narrated a story of his former birth. In that birth, he was a king. A sage cursed that king as he happened to meet, cursed that king. But then he said that he would get absolved of the curse when he meets with a cow. The curse was that he would be born as a very cruel tiger. The tiger further added that it was the moment of the release from the curse as he happened to meet with that cow, Bahula. He was pleased with that cow and permitted her to go home. Since the curse was mitigated, the tiger abandoned his body and resumed the original one, the human form. He became the king and returned to his country to rule over the earth. The place where this episode took place came to be called Bahula Tirtha. It is mentioned further in that story that the Bahula Tirtha is a large land. It is extended to 4 yojanas and it is meritorious. This appears to be a glorification of that sacred place in rather an exaggerated manner. As I said, we do not find any such place now. But there is a small village called Bahul. This Bhima Mahatmya has its Marathi version in 68 verses in the OV meter. The name of the author cannot be found, cannot be said with certainty. He calls himself Datta Kinkara, a servant of Datta. The work was finalized by some Shastri at the instance of Mahadev Bhavani Gaudi, who got this book printed at the Jagdishwar printing press in Mumbai and published it in 1886. This appears to be a free translation of the original Sanskrit work with some additional information inserted by the translator. Thus, we have a legend in its oral as well as written tradition. There exists a similar story in connection with Vrindavan Parikrama. According to that tradition, Bahula was the cow who was very dear to Sri Krishna. He wanted to test her fidelity and therefore assumed the form of a tiger. There is a mention of the Bahula Park or Bahula Vana among the 12 Vanas mentioned in that text. There is a religious custom of the worship of the mother cow on the 4th day of the dark half of the month of Bhadrapada. That is observed for the purpose of obtaining wealth and progeny. This sacred vow, called Bahulavrata, has a connection with the story in question. The oral tradition informs us that in her previous life, before attaining the position as the consort of Lord Srihari, Bahula had taken birth as a cow in the forest of Bahulavana, and her character was severely tested by the Lord himself. One day, Bahula was taken to the pasturing ground by her master or local Brahmana. Almost similar story we find here. So he took her to that ground for grazing so that she could feed on the fresh grass of Bahulavana. Suddenly, a very hungry tiger appeared from the jungle and was preparing to attack and eat Bahula. Seeing that the end was near, Bahula requested the tiger to wait just a moment so that she could feed milk to her hungry calf waiting nearby. Bahula promised to return as soon as the calf was fed. The tiger agreed to the proposal and waited for Bahula to return. Within a short time, after having fed her baby calf, Bahula returned as promised. To her amazement, she found that the tiger had disappeared. And Lord Krishna was standing there along with Yamaraja, who had appeared as the tiger just to test her truthfulness. Being pleased with Bahula's honesty, even in the face of death, Lord Krishna favored her with a boon. He said that in her next life, she would attain the position as one of the goddesses of fortune and achieve the Supreme Lord as her husband. There are similar stories of a cow and a tiger in other Indian languages, in Hindi, Oriya, Telugu, and Kannada. In the Telugu and the Kannada stories, The name of the cow is Punyakoti. In the beautiful Hindi movie Godhuli, the director Girish Karnad has made a good use of this story that appears in the beginning of the movie in order to show how this story is narrated in the Karnataka region. This story, however, has no connection with Lord Krishna and appears to be a folk tale popular among the kids. I'll just give a gist of one of the stories I found. Punyakoti lived in a large forest with her friends and her child. She had kind eyes and was wise. Her friends often came to her with their problems that Punyakoti solved. She loved her friends. Above all, she loved her child, who was very attached to her. One day, Punyakoti went with her friends to eat grass in forest land. She had left her calf at home. While nibbling at the green grass, Punyakoti had moved away from her friends and gone deeper into the forest. To her horror, she was stopped by a hungry tiger. "Oh, tiger, spare my life. I am a mother. I have a calf at home waiting for me to return," pleaded Punyakoti. "You want me to allow you to go home when I am hungry?" asked the tiger. Punyakoti realized that the tiger was right. He ate other animals when he was hungry. So why should he make an exception for her? "At least allow me to go and say goodbye to my calf. I'll hug her once and then I'll come back, I promise," said Punyakoti. The tiger thought about this a little. Punyakoti didn't look like the sort of animal who would lie. Then he agreed. Punyakoti reached home. She hugged her child. She requested her friends to take care of her calf. She says, "If she is in front of you, please do not push her away with her horns. If she is behind, you do not kick her." Her friends were very sad. They even asked her not to return to forest to be eaten up by the cruel beast. Punyakoti looked at her child. She said nothing, but there were tears in her eyes. Punyakoti was firm that she would not go back on her words. Truth is our father and mother. If we do not abide by truth, the Lord will not like it, said Punyakoti, looking at her child. Taking leave of her calf and her friends, Punyakoti walked towards the forest. Meanwhile, the tiger's tummy was rumbling with hunger. He felt foolish that he had allowed the cow to get away. Who will return to certain death? She won't come back. Other tigers will laugh at me when they hear of what I have done, thought the tiger. He was convinced he would not see that cow again. But just then, he saw Punyakoti coming towards him. He was surprised. He asked her sharply, "Why did you choose to come back knowing that you will meet your end?" "I had given my word that I would come back, so I am here. Go ahead and satisfy your hunger." This left the tiger thinking. It was rare for any animal to be so truthful. "All right, I think I can hold on for a while till I find some other food. You go home now, go back to your calf," said the tiger. Punyakoti thanked the tiger and went home to her calf. In the South Indian story for kids, the emphasis is laid on the truthfulness and honesty on part of the cow. The story is available on the internet, on the YouTube. There exist popular songs based on this story in Telugu and Kannada, and I should inform you, an animation film in Sanskrit based on this story is under preparation. Sri Ravi Shankar, the producer of this film, who works as consultant at the Human Resource Department of Infosys, claims that it is the first ever animation film being produced in Sanskrit. We find this story in the print and the electronic media as well. It is thus interesting to see how a particular story takes different shapes in the course of time and how it is narrated in various parts of India with different purposes, with different motives. The story appears basically to be a folklore existing in oral and written traditions. Now, coming back to our legend of Bahula cow and the river of that name, I intend to examine another, a somewhat different aspect of that legend. The name Bahula occurs in the Mahabharata as the name of a river. In the Bhishma Parvan, Adhyaya 10, verse 26. In the Varaha Purana, it is mentioned that the river Bahula is situated to the west of Naishadha mountain, close to 7 prominent mountains. The identification of a river with a cow is an ancient phenomenon. There is a mantra in the famous hymn of the Rigveda, which is called Vishwamitra Nadi Samvada, Mandala 3, hymn 33. It says, Praparvatanam ushati upasthat ashve iva vishite hasamane gaveva shubhre matara rihane vipat chutudri payasa javete Acha sindhum matrutamam vipasha murvim subhagam aganmo vatsa viva matara samrihane samanam yonim anusancharanti. I give a brief translation. Vishwamitra says, forth from the lap of the mountains, the Vipash and the Shutudri rivers speed with their milk. They are eager, racing with each other like two mares unloosed, resplendent like two mother cows licking their calves. Vishwamitra continues, I have driven to the most motherly river Shutudri. We have come to the broad, well-portioned Vipash. The two who are like mothers together, licking their calf, proceeding along the same womb, that is riverbed. Incidentally, the motherly aspect of the cows has also been mentioned in the Pali Tipitaka in a couple of gathas in the Brahmana Dhammika Sutta. In those gathas, the cows are said to be our relatives. It is further reiterated that the cows are not to be killed. The gathas say, Yatha mata pita bhata anye vapicha yataka gavo no parama mitta yasu jayanti osatha annada balada cheta vannada sukhada tatha etamattha vasanyatva nasu gavo hanim-sute. Like mother, father, brother, or any other kind of kin, cows are our kin, most excellent ones, from whom emerge many medicinal herbs, Oshadhi. They give us food and strength. They give good complexion and happiness. One should know this truth and should not kill the cattle. It is significant that the word payas in Sanskrit has two meanings. It means milk as well as water. The celestial waters are conceived as cows. In the Rigvedic hymns addressed to Indra, there is a frequent mention of his enemy Vritra, or the serpent, who obstructs the waters. Indra smashed the serpent. He bored out the waters. Like bellowing milk cows streaming out, the waters went straight down to the sea. Indra smashed Vritra and uncovered the hidden openings of the waters that were like the cows captivated by panis. Thus, the rivers are identified with cows, and also in later literature, particularly in the Puranas. In this connection, S.A. Dange observes, I quote, "The only beast that came to be the norm for a river is the cow. The identification of a river with cow is ancient, and water on the earth and rainwater have already been indicated by a word milk, that is payas. In one account, it is stated that during the deluge, the sage Markandeya saw a cow in the midst of the vast ocean. She was the river Narmada, sent by Shiva to rescue the sage. The river Gautami is called Godavari, and both these words have been derived from the word Go, which means cow. Gautami, Gautami, and Godavari. Like Gautami and Godavari, the name of the river Payoshni points to such similar notion to the fresh, warm milk of a cow. In the later Mahatmyas too, there are references to rivers whose names are related to the words for cow and whose origin stories involve a cow. We frequently find a gomukha, a stone structure showing the mouth of a cow from which the water comes out. In a number of places, the water flows out of a pool or a tank through the gomukha. The Mahatmyas praising various rivers glorify them as cows or kamadhenus, wish-fulfilling cows. The relation between a river and a cow has some connection with the earth as well. In ancient Sanskrit literature, the earth is considered to be a cow. The word go in Sanskrit has several meanings. One of them is the earth. The Nighantu, a Vedanga text, begins with the names of the earth, Prithvi Namani, and the first name of the earth is Gauhu. The earth is a reservoir of water. The water flows out of the earth. Therefore, the earth conceived as a cow is the origin of the river. There is another Vedic word Payasvati, which means that which is endowed with payas. This word is used in the context of the earth. There is a mantra in the Rig Veda which says, Indra Sita Nigrunnatu Tam Pusha Abhirakshatu Sanas Saraswati Duham Uttaram Samam. It is also found in other Samhitas, also in the Atharva Veda and elsewhere. It means, let Indra lay down the furrow, let Pushan extend her straight, let her, full of milk, yield milk to us summer after summer. Rivers and cows are generally of a cool temperament. They help us by giving water and milk respectively. However, both of them can be fierce at times. In the case of a river, when there is a flood, her appearance is fearful. In that case, in the case of a cow, when someone attacks her or tries to trouble her, she tries to protect herself fiercely. The river as well as the cow with a fearful appearance can be described as Bhima. We have a river of that name, Bhima. It is possible to say that the name was given on the basis of fearful appearance of the river when it is flooded. As regards the cow, it is said in the Atharva Veda that if someone tries to harm a Brahmin's cow, she becomes fierce. It says, Saisha Bhima Brahma Gavi Aghavisha Sakshat Krutya Pulbajamavrita. This is the cow of a Brahmin, which is a fierce one. It possesses deadly poison. She is the witchcraft incarnate. She has covered herself with Kulbaja. The word Kulbaja occurs only twice in the Atharva Veda in this hymn, and the meaning of the word is not clear. We know that it is not a Brahmin's cow alone that can be fearful. Any cow can have that temperament. We have an expression in Marathi, Marki Gai or Marki Mais, meaning raging cow or buffalo, raging buffalo. In Morsewood Dictionary, Marathi English Dictionary, the word Marki is translated as beating and buffeting. Thus, a river, a cow, and the earth, all the three are connected with each other, and the word payas is the element common to all of them. River as a cow, it is basically a metaphor of a cow being used since the Vedic times. It continued to be used in various ways. In her book, Water and Womanhood, Anne Feldhaus discusses the identification of rivers and cows, traces it back to the earliest Indian literature, the Rig Veda, and goes on referring to the Mahatmya literature. I have quoted from her, I have given a gist of her statements in my lecture. She also points out the violent and dangerous nature of rivers and cows. While the rivers are considered cows, the cows are also named after the names of rivers, such as Ganga, Yamuna, Krishna, and so on. Thus, a metaphoric connection between a river and a cow is reflected in the stories, in the oral as well as the textual traditions. In the story of Bahula, however, there is something more. The cow is the origin of the river. We do not find that episode of digging the ground and getting the water and the origin of the Bahula river. So there, in that context, the river comes to be known by the name of the cow. Now I must point out here that I had thought of a symbiotic relation between the cow and the river, and I was trying to find clear evidence to establish that relation. There was certain reason to use the word symbiotic. However, after having examined all the sources that are discussed here now, I must say that such a relation can hardly be seen in the stories or legends that we find either in oral or in the textual traditions. At this stage, I am not aware of any other source that could point to the symbiotic relation between a river and a cow. All that I can see is that the relation is based mainly on the metaphor. So the relation is symbolic, but not necessarily symbiotic. Therefore, I think now the title of the topic has to be changed. And the new title could be River as a Cow and Cow as a River, the Legend of Bahula. I would like to summarize my talk in a few words. The legend of Bahula points to the relation between a river Bahula and a cow named Bahula and explains why the name Bahul or Bahula Tirtha is given to that place. Such sources are useful for identifying the places and the origin of their names. Further, the present study reveals how a particular legend is recorded in various oral traditions and how it is reflected in various texts. It is also interesting to see how the legend undergoes certain changes in the course of time and continues in various parts of the country as a folk tale being used variously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bahulkar. It was indeed a very interesting and at the same time a talk which reveals many aspects of the oral traditions, the textual traditions as they appear in Puranas, and many times their origin to be found in the Vedic literature. The Sthala Puranas, as they can be described, in which one of the Sthala Puranas wherein this story of Bahula occurs and is in a way complemented by the oral tradition which you have heard in your childhood. Such Sthala Puranas have an origin of themselves. I'm not surprised to know that, well, this Bahula Mahatmya, which appears in the Uttarakhanda section of the Padma Purana, does not appear in the critical edition of the Padma Purana, which has been published. I can quote other examples, so many examples in this case. Recently, I have been studying some of the Mahatmyas and Puranas that appear as a part of the Sahyadri Khanda of the Skanda Purana. And in that, one very big section deals with the Amali Grama Mahatmya, Amali Grama being the village of Mahur in Nanded, present Nanded district. It has become so important now that this place, which was earlier in Kinwat district, because of its importance as a sacred place, and also other reasons, economic reasons, has become a taluka place now. In this Purana, we find so many stories. This Amali Grama Mahatmya, we find so many stories. One of the main stories it relates is about Dattatreya himself, then the legend of Parashurama, Renuka, and her husband, the great sage Jamadagni, and also Renuka being later on treated or accepted as the one of the manifestations of Parvati and one of the Pithas connected with the Shakti. Now we know the Shakti legend very well, and that must have come up at least before 9th century AD. And that tells how this Shakti Pitha, which is part of the various places spread all over India, are connected with the Shakti cult. Now this legend of Renuka is associated with that. And at that place, she is worshipped not only as Ekavira, which is one of the manifestations of the three Shaktis, but also she is said to be the very manifestation of all the three Shaktis, that is Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati, and Mahakali. My own understanding, so what has happened, that so many legends which were there earlier in the Purana, for example, Mandavya Kathas in Mahabharata, then later on so many other hermitage is supposed to be located somewhere in North India on the banks of Ganga. But now conveniently it is told to us that, well, it is in the Mahuli Grama itself. So it is connected with the story of Anasuya, who is a Pativrata. It is now the story goes on along with one Gunavati, who is another Pativrata. Because of her vow, the sun cannot rise, because she has been cursed by Animandavya as he was dashed against while she was carrying her husband and caused pain to her. He says that as soon as the sun rises, your husband will die. And she tries to plead with Animandavya about her innocence and inadvertence through which this incident occurred. And then it so happens that, well, the sun does not rise. All the three gods, that is Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, they come to Atri's ashrama. Now Atri's ashrama is again located on the bank of river Saraswati. And this way, in the Sthala Puranas, we will find that, well, there is a sacred place which is taking shape around the Renuka, where the Shaktipitha is there, and then so many characters, they come nearby. So Datta is there, who is also important Mahanubhava character in Mahanubhava mythology. Then Parashurama is there, whose ashrama, Jamadagni's ashrama, is either located near Kanyakubja or on the banks of Narmada, that is relocated here. So this type of relocation and reformation of the legends which are there already in Mahabharata and Ramayana, that does happen and takes the shape of Sthala Purana. Now, coming to the oral tradition itself, I would not take much of your time and say that the oral tradition you mentioned about, say, whether the oral tradition comes first or the textual tradition. I would myself say that, well, first of all, it has to be oral tradition, because somebody has to tell the myth and then it gets a particular form. But when you say that the textual tradition is earlier, as in the case of Animandavya and other things, they were already there in Mahabharata, but they reappear as oral tradition in the regional form. So such type of things, they must be going on. And your treatment of the whole thing, that is the combination or the interrelationship between the words of Go, meaning Prithvi, as also the river, as also you can say sacred place. So all these, a cow, all these, they in a way tell how the mythical language is very much connected with metaphors. And it goes on playing on the metaphors, and through that it creates various symbols. And these symbols, as they become more and more relevant in a given situation, in a given period, they reappear in different forms. That is how I would look at the whole thing. And therefore, they are very much important, because my own study tells me that ultimately this Amali Grama Mahatmya, which comes around the story of the Shaktipitha, then it brings together the characters of Dattatreya, Jamadagni, Atri, and even Kapila is there. I first of all could not understand why Kapila and Kardama and Devahuti, they are there. They are there because Anasuya, along with Devahuti, happens to be the daughter of a Prajapati. So they are sisters, and in a way, they are connected. So Kapila also comes. So this way we'll find that the sacred geography, in a way, as per its needs, brings all these characters and things come on. It is not the imagination of one author, according to me, because Mandavya Rishi's tale has been told in Mahanubhava literature. And a similar story, that there is something like a rock where Mandavya was, in a village called Balle Grama. It is Balaka Grama, and it is identified in Jalna district now. So the legends, when they are required, they emerge in the given regions as per the you can say, religious requirements, they emerge forth and they take shape and give something like a message. The message which was given in Bahula's story was that regarding the truthfulness. The message which is given through this Shaktipitha is about a woman being Pativrata and her glory and greatness because of her Pativratya. So I think these are different legends and myths. They come as per the requirements of the time. They are not created. They come up, according to me. They emerge and they take a shape as per the requirements, religious requirements of the people. Dr. Bahulkar, I am really grateful to you because the incident which we mentioned when I was there and you also gave your speech, there was a brief mention about it, but you showed how a very, you can say, applied scholarship can bring about all these different elements. The symbolism regarding the word go, for example, and the story of Bahula as it is connected even with Vrindavan or something like that. So words do matter. The symbols which are connected with those words also do matter, and they give a message. Ultimately, I think religion consists of mythology, which are the stories of immortality, as Susan Langer says. The rituals are enactments, and the morals of the story are our ethics that guide our life. Thank you very much for this very scholarly and at the same time very interesting talk, telling us how a very honest study with tireless efforts and application can bring out wonderful results. Thank you very much. I now invite our Professor Kshisagar ji to see if there are any questions or something like that, and the author will be very glad to answer them if we have got some time left for our
Yes,
this
we
question.
do. We do. I think there may be some questions in the chat box. Otherwise, each person who would like to ask a question can unmute themselves.
Yeah, at least I can see the chat box. There are some comments saying wonderful and very interesting, etc., etc. But there is no question as such at this moment. But
No, Parinita
I think
Deshpande
Parinita has asked
hand.
a question.
Parinita, yes.
Yeah. May I, sir?
yeah, please.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say about what Dr. Jamkhedkar commented, that metaphorical language how it can focus on the mythical aspect. I would like to give reference of Kalidas when he says in the Raghuvamsha that Dudoha gam sa sasyaya yajnaya. So see here the use of the word of the dhatu duha, which means to milk. This symbolism which you mentioned in your legend, and this combat motif of cow attacked by some wild beast like tiger or lion, I think has also entered in the textual tradition. Can we say that in Raghuvamsha that similar incident is there in the Dilipa Simha Samvada? Not exactly, but just this combat motif which you have mentioned in the legend. That's what.
In Kalidasa, you have rightly pointed out that. And also there is another reference in Kalidasa in Raghuvamsha. Jugopa Gorupa Dharami Vorvim. Okay. Yeah. Here also there is a metaphor.
Yes.
It's not only the earth, even the heaven is also
Yes.
regarded as a cow,
Yes.
because in the 5th sarga of Raghuvamsha,
Yes.
Deurapi yena dugdha. Okay, here because Devhu is a feminine word and also supposed to be, in that context at least, a cow. Because
And then there only it has said sasyaya maghava divam. So divam api dudoho. So this milking.
so this is something like metaphorical usage
Yeah.
of the word duha. Okay.
Focusing or having the hidden reference of legendary reference, we can say.
There are some more questions.
Yeah.
People, yeah. I think Dr. Feldhaus is saying something. And next, someone else.
No, Miss
Radha Vallabhji also
Read
has
in the
a
chat
question.
box. Chat box.
Professor-
Nagamani has made a very interesting comment. You
Radha
can take it.
Vallabhji has a question.
Yeah, and yeah, Dr. Kutumba Shastri also has an observation to make.
Also, Radha Tripathi wants to say something. He has a question.
Tripathi ji, please. Your question, please.
Yeah, my video is not appearing. I think I am audible.
Yes, yes, you
Yes,
are audible,
please.
sir.
Yes.
So, thank you very much, Dr. Professor Bahulkar and Professor Jamkhedkar ji, for very illuminating lectures by both of you. And they were quite revealing and example of first-hand research. I have a small question. The legend of Ranti Deva and the making of river Charmanvati or Chambal is perhaps referred in Mahabharata, and Kalidasa and Meghdutta says that Sroto Murtya Bhui Parinatam Ranti Devasya Kirtim. So how would Professor Bahulkar correlate this legend to his whole exposition of this correlationship between cow and river and Prithvi? This is I was curious to know only this. Thank you.
Well, this story of Rantideva, you have rightly mentioned that, and also in the first canto of Buddha Charita, there is a mention of Rantideva or Antideva. And this story is also, it falls under that category. Okay. So, unfortunately, I would not say much about that. I will have to go through the story in detail and find out what it actually means. But apparently, it seems that it is the same motive, same spirit with which it is narrated.
Thank you.
In this correction, may I mention one thing? See, I am reminded of Vena being the first king and ruling the earth. At Mamallapura, there is a sculpture wherein he is actually seen milking the cow. So that cow is earth and nobody else. There is a sculpture.
I think he's Prathu and not Vena who was milking the.
Sorry, you are right. Prithu, and that is why she becomes Prithvi. Prithu Vainya, I think. He is son of Vena.
Vainya it could be.
Vainya, Prithu Vainya.
Vainya, Prithu Vainya.
Dr. Kutumba Shastri has a comment to make, if you allow it.
Yeah, I hope I am audible now.
Yes, sure.
Oh, it is a very exciting and enlightening lecture. I appreciate, I got one great benefit out of listening and following this lecture, that though we do not give proper attention to the folklore tales, they do have an interconnection with even remotest to Vedic literature. That's what this lecture has today established. Vedic tradition, Puranic tradition, literary tradition, and folk tradition. all these have got some great interconnectivity. This truth is really a great contribution of Bahulkarji because it goes a long way. We should take everything seriously in its place. Okay, there may be amendments and all. Therefore, that is one how I am benefited by listening to him. Secondly, what I feel is this Brahmagavi, the word in Atharva Veda, can we explain it as a Visheshana Samasa instead of Brahmana cow, we can even call Brahman, which is cow. That is, the quality of Brahman is only Shanta and all that. What I feel is the Atharvaveda Rishi might have been intending to say, otherwise normally very soft and very soft behavioral cow also turns to be violent when it has been challenged or something. If such a possibility is there in the Vedic mantra and with commentaries and bhashyas, I want to just give that my piece of mind on that. Secondly, was it Payaswati or Saraswati in the Rik? I think it should be Payaswati. No, I think Atharvaveda mantra or Rig mantra, I did not follow it. Full of that.
Rigveda mantra, it is also, it occurs in Atharva Veda as well.
As well, but is it Saraswati there?
No. Sana Payaswati Duham Uttaram Sama.
Yes,
It is
yes.
Sita. It is Sita.
Sorry, I heard that Saraswati, when I heard your lecture, I felt Saraswati. So how come Saraswati come here? And secondly, one more observation. Now having Tripathi and Professor Jamkhetkarji, it is very great to listen to him too. What I feel is, actually, these three things are there. Vena's story of cutting the sarpa and releasing the waters, that is a cosmic phenomena. It is in cosmic level. And earth is our mundane level. Cow is in our individual level. These three have got a sadharmya. Why they go always in similarity? The sadharmya of all the three is that they protect the life. Just like waters from Duloka and Prithvi by water as well as by various other factors. And when it comes to the individuals, nothing is a mother after. No animal is next to mother than the cow. Therefore, all the three have got the sustenance characteristic and motherly characteristics. That's why they are always called Go Mata, Nadi Mata, Bhu Mata, and Go Mata. Because the Matrutva Dharma is the sadharmya between all the three. That's what it came to my mind. If it is, it can be explained. Thank you very much. Very enlightening lecture.
Ms. Nagamani has made a comment, which I will read out. Many temples from Andhra located on the river confluences have legends connected to Go Mahatmya. One such beautiful example, attested by epigraphy, was from Thirumala in Kurnool district, dated to the reign of Chalukya Vikramaditya, 7th century CE. It relates to the story of the sacred Surabhi of Jamadagni Maharishi.
Yes, may I mention something in this connection? That there are always stories coming back to that word Brahma, go, or cow. We'll find that there is story about Vasa on Arbuda Parvata. And the story like Sahasrama comes there and it is taken away. And Vasishtha says that you have to protect yourself. And from that cow, from a Romas, the Kshatriyas come out and protect the earth. So you will find the word cow is in both the senses. Similarly, the metaphor of Varaha is also used like that. Many kings call themselves Varaha. In fact, they issue, and those coins are called Varaha coins. So the Kalashuris and others, they issue And the whole episode goes back to the depiction at Udaygiri, meaning near Sanchi, wherein that Varaha Murti has been depicted. So Varaha representing protecting the earth, and therefore the king being the protector of the earth, and the cow protecting herself. Similar stories about cow of Jamadagni also and Sahasrarjuna. So we'll find that this is a very common mythological motif, and cow having, and that's why we can understand now how the whole thing has come into why cow is sacred for all the Hindus, because of its all these metaphorical and other, the symbol is so pregnant with so many meanings that, well, it is a very, and I'm really thankful again to Professor Bahulkar for throwing light on various aspects of the word go.
Dr. Mangala Sardeshpande wants to ask a question. Hello.
What I wanted to say has already been said. I wanted to ask whether this legend is not above all a tribute to motherhood, because the main thing about each legend, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because the main thing here is the cow's intense love for its calf. And could you say that the earth feeds and the cow also feeds with its milk, and finally one would say even the river feeds. And I thought of the book by Anne Feldhaus, Water and Womanhood, in which she has brought this out too.
I have mentioned that book, and also I have referred to that book, and also I have given a gist of her statement in my lecture, and fortunately she is also present here.
Okay.
It's a very illuminating book, very what to say, in a very scholarly manner. She has analyzed various texts, particularly Mahatmyas. And as I have mentioned in my lecture, there are various elements in the story. That is, the motherly, like matrutva or motherhood is the element common to all these legends, and also Prithvi and the river and the cow. Secondly, the truthfulness. This is also another aspect. But I wanted to point out something which is not said. That is the place name and a history of name. There is, as we know, there is a place name Society of India in Mysore. And many years ago, I was instrumental in establishing Pune chapter of that, because I was interested in place names. So this is something, one of my attempts to find the source, and we find a story. So this is another aspect, analysis of a legend, which is connected to the place name also. Otherwise, this folk tale is narrated in many ways, and depending upon what the narrator wants to say. Yeah, and Anne Feldhaus has said, greeting from Arizona, where the sun is just now rising. So happy about this lecture. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think all questions are over, and I am
ma'am.
grateful to all. Yes, please.
No, I was wondering if Dr. Feldhaus would like to say something.
Yeah.
Unmute
Actually,
herself.
I expected the same from her.
No, we're inviting
yes.
her to speak.
Thank you so much. I think it's just wonderful that someone named Bahulkar has gone into the story of Bahula, the good mother, and has looked into this wonderful imagery about cows and rivers and food and milk. And I hope that your talk will inspire many more people to look further into these topics. Thank you very, very much for this.
Yeah, and actually I must say that I was inspired by your book, Water and Motherhood. I read it quite often. And then when I was thinking about that, actually, I was not sure about that. But when I was asked to speak something as a chief guest in the seminar in the memory of Dr. Dere, the seminar was oral tradition, oral history, and I'm totally ignorant of that. I requested not to bother me, but they insisted, and then I picked up something which I wanted to say, and luckily I got, and it's a coincidence that I was reading your book at that time. So thank you very much for inspiring me through your book.
Well, thank you very much for reading it and for taking it further. Greetings to everyone.
So if there are no more questions, shall we bring the evening to a close?
Meenal,
Isha?
Meenal, just
Haji.
a moment. I would like to thank Dr. Anne Feldhaus, who has given the first lecture in this endowment in 2012. She had talked about Dhangar Obis. Am I right, Dr. Feldhaus?
Yes, that's right. I didn't realize it was the
You
first, but I
were the first speaker, and so I am so happy that you could attend this lecture today.
I'm so happy you had it when at least it was not the middle of the night where I am.
You had to get up very early. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that remark, Meena. I'm glad you pointed it out. Yes, she was the very first speaker for the Durga Bhagwat lecture. We have a list. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Feldhaus. So I think that's all. Usha, are there any more questions, comments? No?
Yeah.
So then let me just end by saying that it gives me immense pleasure to thank you, Dr. Bahulkar, for such a riveting lecture. We have been greatly enriched by your insights, and we are overwhelmed by the depth of your knowledge. Dr. Zamkhedkar, your comments, as always, are thought-provoking, and we have greatly benefited by looking at the world through the lens of folktales, legends, and mythology. As always, our grateful thanks go to you. I thank all the participants for their presence and their involvement, in particular, members of Durga Bai's family who have joined us on this occasion. I think Dr. Shirish and Charu are both there. I also thank the technical team for their continued support. Thank you all, and I wish you all a very good evening.
Thank you very much. And it was just a short notice, I know, but you made it a point. You could spare time, got up very early. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for inviting me, even though it was at the last
And
minute.
tomorrow I am going to listen to your lecture. You are going to speak.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
It's already been taped.
Yeah,
It's
May
already
we
been
know-
taped. So,
May
yeah.
we know where? May we know
Yeah.
where Dr.
Yeah.
Feldhaus is going to speak?
Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapeeth.
Oh, okay. So we don't have the link. No.